Today we're going to talk about reciprocals of real numbers, and we're going to do one more section, 2.9, and then after this. These two are related. You'll see why in a minute, okay? So first of all, does anybody know what a reciprocal is? Reciprocal of a number? How do we define it in math? Okay, two people. Alright, how about, that's it? Two people. How many people have heard of reciprocals before? Raise your hand. Okay, good. A lot more of it. Okay, somebody can give me an example. Who could give me an example of a reciprocal? Maybe not defining it then. Paige?
4 and 1/4.
Yeah, 4 and 1/4. They're reciprocal of each other, right? What about -4? What's the reciprocal of -4?
4.
How about Dana? -1/4 is correct. So what do they do when you multiply the number and its reciprocal? It always becomes 1. Exactly. That's how we define this. Write this down. Two numbers whose product is 1 are called reciprocals. Another way to call reciprocal, a little bit more, another way is multiplicative inverse. Okay, that's sort of a little bit more. You could actually call this as a multiplicative inverse, but we know this. We know them as reciprocals, right? So A over B, if you have A over B like a fraction, reciprocal of that will be B over A, right? You know that. Okay, so sometimes you will see this as reciprocal, maybe called multiplicative inverse. It's sort of another way of calling it. So write this down. So for example, if I have numbers like 2/3, can somebody give me a reciprocal of 2/3? Okay, everyone should know how to do that, right? How about Patty? What do you think?
3 over 2.
Exactly, 3 over 2. Because if you were to multiply them, right, you get 1. Shortcut will be you change the numerator with the denominator. Basically, that's what you do, right? So what if you have a number like 5? Well, 5 only doesn't have any numerator or denominator, so how do you write it as reciprocal? Well, you could write 5. Jason, you could write 5 as a fraction, can't you? What is 5 really?
5 over 1.
Yeah, so what's the reciprocal of 5 over 1? 1/5. Does that make sense? So if you get a number in like an integer, that's easy, right? It's always that integer over 1. You could write that as a fraction if you want. Okay? What about a negative fraction? -2/3? What's the reciprocal of? But first of all, do you guys think the reciprocal will be negative or positive? Raise your hand if you think it's going to be negative. Raise your hand. Raise your hand if you think it's going to be positive. Okay. Actually, reciprocal, remember, think about this. When you multiply the number times its reciprocal, you should get +1, right? So if the number is negative, does it make sense then the reciprocal has to be positive? No. What's negative times positive? You get negative, so you're not going to get +1, right? So therefore, Claire, what do you think? Do you think it's going to be negative or positive? It's going to be negative. It has to be, okay? Otherwise, there's no way you're going to get +1. And of course, Carolyn, what's the reciprocal of 2/3? Yeah, the reciprocal of -2/3 is -3 over 2 is correct, okay? Does that make sense? So please keep that in mind, okay? If a fraction is negative, the reciprocal of that fraction must be negative. Or not just, doesn't have to be a fraction, it could be any number, right? If the number is negative, the reciprocal of that number must be negative, okay? In order for it to be positive. Good. So I wrote this for you, okay? So if the number is negative, the reciprocal must be also negative, okay? That's always true. Okay. So then what if I have a number like this, a decimal, -1.25? What is then the reciprocal of this -1.25 going to be? Can I just write it this way? -1 over 1.25? We know it's going to be like, it has to be negative, so. No?
It has to be negative.
Yeah, so it has to be negative, but is this okay to write? -1 over 1.25. Yes, sir?
Would it be 10? -10 over?
-10 over? Why did you say -10? No, I don't think so. Why would it be -10? No, I'm just saying, isn't this -1.25 really -1.25 over 1? So I just changed the numerator and the denominator. Is this okay? It's not quite okay, okay? See, this is not quite simplified. When you have a fraction, okay, this is not simplified. When you have a fraction, you may not have numerators or denominator as a decimal. Does that make sense? Or it cannot be fractions either. What kind of numbers do we want? Whoops. What kind of numbers do we want the numerators and the denominators to be? of a fraction? They have to be? Yes? Integers. We want them to be an integer, don't we? We don't want them to be some kind of fractions or decimals. Does that make sense? Okay. So then how are we going to write the reciprocal of this negative 1.25? Oops, I'm showing you all these. Okay. Anybody? Have an idea? So how can we figure out the reciprocal of negative 1.25? Any idea? Yes, sir.
Negative 100 over 125.
In other words, we write negative 1.25 as a
125.
fraction, right? So yeah, you could write this as 125 over 100, or yes.
You can do negative 1 over 1 and 1/4.
Yeah, isn't this negative 1 and 1/4? Again, still this doesn't help us too much because to write as reciprocal, we don't want them as a mixed number. We want them as a improper. So how would you rewrite negative 1 and 1/4 as an improper fraction? This is the same as, yes, Camilla? Negative 5 over 4. Now it's easy. So please keep this in mind. If you have some numbers like decimals, rewrite them as a fraction that's improper. Okay? Then it's really easy to come up with the reciprocal. Everyone, what's the reciprocal of negative 5 over 4? It is, first of all, is it going to be negative or positive?
Negative.
Negative what?
4/5.
4/5. You just now change, all you have to do is then change the numerator and denominator. Once you have it as a improper fraction. Is that okay? Does that make sense? Okay. Are we good? All right. So, good. Write that down if you have. So what do you guys think about this statement? This statement is true, right? All real numbers have its reciprocal, right? We just saw one where if it's a decimal, right, you could have a reciprocal. If it's fraction, of course, it's going to have a reciprocal. If it's negative number, it's going to have a reciprocal. Is this true? How many people say yes, this is true? Raise your hand. Okay. Oh. Some people, oh, how many people say no? Well, how many people are not so sure? Okay. Did anybody say no? Actually, the answer is no. This is not quite true yet. Dakota, you said no, right? What do you think is no?
0.
Yeah, exactly. You gotta write that except 0. Because does 0 have a reciprocal? In other words, can you multiply 0 times something so that it equals to 1? Is that possible? No, remember there's a property, right? When you multiply anything by 0, you always get 0. So there is no way by multiplying 0 times something that you get 1, correct? So now the statement is true. Does that make sense? So all real numbers have reciprocals except 0. 0 doesn't have any reciprocals. Okay, so let me show you. See, if I have 0, you could think of 0 as 0 over 1. Well, can I write then 1 over 0? Not really, because 1 over 0 is undefined. Does that make sense? So therefore, 0 has no reciprocal, right? I mean, 0 is 0 over 1, but if you write its reciprocal, it's undefined. Okay. So please keep that in mind. All right? Any question about these reciprocals? So tonight's homework, they're going to ask you to write reciprocal of some numbers, and you know how to do that. Yeah, question?
So 0 can never be in the denominator, right?
Exactly. 0 can never be in the denominator. You're right. It'll be undefined. In other words, there is no such number like that on a number line. You cannot find that. It's not there. Now, let me give you some trivial facts. What's the reciprocal of 1 over AB? Everybody? AB over 1. You just, again, replace the numerator with the denominator. Okay, something you already knew. Okay, so there you go. Okay, and another, this is sort of random, but I get this question gets asked a lot. 1 over negative a. Is this number positive or negative? Well, I guess it really depends on what a is, but you know, okay. So let me not ask that question because if a is negative, this will be positive, right? But how can I rewrite this number? In other words, we don't normally write it this way, do we? 1 over negative a. How would you rewrite this? It would just be negative, right? Isn't this just negative 1 over a? So you know that they're equivalent, right? What about this? Could I have negative 1 on the numerator and a on the bottom? Well, we don't normally write it this way. I guess we do this sometimes. But what does this really mean? Negative 1 over a, right? Does that make sense? right? So we know then 1 over negative a is really same as negative 1 over a, right? Wouldn't you not agree? Because they're both negative, right? The whole thing is negative 1 over a, right? Is there a way to show this algebraically? Why these two fractions are equivalent? I don't know if you ever thought of it this way. Because sometimes people ask me, why are these equivalent? 1 over negative a, right? Well, and is there a way to show this algebraically? There is. Let me show you right now. Anybody see it? How do you show this algebraically that they're equivalent? Oh, Patty.
Anything divided or multiplied by another is negative.
Sure, you could think of it that way. Sure. Yeah, because you're dividing positive divided by negative. The whole thing is going to be some negative number. Sure. Another way of thinking about this is you could actually multiply this fraction by 1. When you multiply a fraction by 1, does it change its value at all? Like if you multiply 1 times 3/4, it's still what? 3/4, right? Remember, that's the identity property of multiplication. But I'm going to use special one. I'm going to use negative 1 over 1. I mean negative 1 over negative 1. Is that still 1? Negative 1 over negative 1 is not still 1? What's negative over negative? What's negative 1 over negative 1? It's positive 1. It's still 1, isn't it? Right? So it does not change the value of this. But what do you get on the numerator if I multiply it like this? I get? On the numerator, I get negative 1, right? And then denominator, what's negative times negative? Positive. So it's sort of a, it's not, it doesn't really go with this section that much. It sort of does, but people ask me, like, why are they equivalent? So I just wanted to sort of put it out there. And this is the reason why, algebraically, right? You're really basically multiplying the top of the fraction and the bottom of the fraction by negative 1. Because negative 1 over negative 1 is still 1, right? It doesn't really change the value of that fraction. So that's why they're equivalent, okay? Are you okay with that? So, sorry, it's sort of random, but kind of does sort of goes together. Okay, another fact is this: is there a way? Because when you're doing your homework tonight, you might want to do this. Is there a way to rewrite 1 over AB as product of two fractions? That's possible? Yes. Not reciprocal, but how did this fraction become 1 over AB? So you can kind of think of what it was. Spencer?
1 over a times 1 over
Exactly right. So some of you say, I knew that, you know. Yeah, so this is another fact that you may need to know to do your homework. Sometimes it's easier to separate this fraction as product of two fractions to maybe simplify or do things like that. Okay, so just sort of keep that in mind when you do your homework tonight. Is that okay? But we all knew this fact, right? I mean, we're really used to going from here, 1 over a times 1 over b to 1 over ab. That's what we're used to. You could go backwards too, to make it simpler if that works. Is that okay? All right, nothing new, right? This is all something new. Okay, good. Now we're ready for the next section. Okay, here we go. Okay, now next section is 2.9. Dividing real numbers is our topic. Okay, dividing real numbers, 2.9. Dividing real. Why do you think we're doing the previous section with this section together? In other words, how does reciprocal sort of how is reciprocal sort of or how do they go together? In other words, anybody? Yes, sir.
It's a fraction, so it really means to divide.
Okay. In other words, yes. Also.
dividing and multiplying by the reciprocal.
Exactly. When you divide, you are really, it's a shortcut of, just like when you subtract, what's it mean? Adding the opposite. Same way, when you divide two numbers, guess what? It's same as multiplying by the, not opposite, reciprocal. That's why we talked about reciprocal. So here, if I have, here's a definition of division, okay? Just like definition of subtraction, dividing two numbers is really same as multiplying by the reciprocal. Here's an example. A divided by B. It just means A times the reciprocal of B, which is, what's the reciprocal of B, guys? Reciprocal of B is 1 over B. Does that make sense? And I was sort of careful. I said B can't be 0 here, right? Because if B was 0, it would be undefined. In words, you could actually say this: to divide by a non-zero number So we gotta be careful. We can't divide by 0, right? So to divide by a non-zero number, you basically, what you're doing is you're multiplying by its reciprocal. All right, Claire? Okay. So you go ahead and write it down. I'll wait. So let's take a look at this example. So 0 divided by 3, this is undefined, correct? Raise your hand if you think it's undefined. Right, because you can't divide by 0, right? 0 divided by 3 is undefined. Can people think, actually no, I think there is an answer. Oh, really? One person? One brave, 2 brave people, 3 brave people, 4 brave. You guys are correct. This does have answers. 5. This is not undefined, guys. Am I dividing by 0 or am I dividing by 3? I'm dividing by 3, right? I'm not dividing by 0, am I? The first number that I'm dividing happens to be 0, but I'm not dividing by 0, am I? Therefore, what's the answer for this, class? This is 0, because what does 1 divided by 3 really mean? 1 times the reciprocal of 3, which is not negative. Reciprocal of 3 is 1/3. Okay, you're thinking of subtraction. Okay, we're not doing subtraction. This is division. So therefore, 0 times any number, right, is what? 0. Therefore, this is 0. Right? When do you get undefined? If you do what? Yeah. Exactly. When I have like 3 divided by 0, then, yes, sir?
For homework, do we show that second step?
Yes, please. For the homework, for division symbol, I want you to rewrite it as a multiplication, just like how we rewrite subtraction as addition. So, Eugene, what's this? What's the answer for 3 divided by 0? This will be undefined, right? Because does 0 have a reciprocal? No, it doesn't, right? You get 1 over 0. Okay, you can think of 0 as 0 over 1, but reciprocal will be 1 over 0. It's undefined. Therefore, you cannot divide it by 0. Okay, so this is undefined. Okay, you cannot divide 3 by 0. Okay. What about 0 divided by 0? Is it 0? 0 divided by 0? Yes, sir.
0.
Is 0? No, it's not.
1.
How many people think it's 1? Raise your hand. Okay, it's not 1. I know that same number over same number, like 5 over 5 is 1, right? Does not work for 0. Because, what are you really doing? Yeah. Yeah, it's undefined because when you do 0 divided by 0, you're still dividing by 0. And I just told you can't divide by 0. So even if the first number is 0, you can't divide it by 0. Okay, it's still undefined. Does that make sense? So some of you may say, oh, you have so many zeros, like maybe 0. No, it's not 0. Some of you may think, oh, same number divided by same number, is that 1? No, not for 0, because you're still dividing by 0. Right? It goes under this category, right? You cannot divide by 0. Yes? Okay. So please keep that in mind. Right? So now I want to talk about rules for division. And I wrote, it's same as the multiplication. Does anybody know why I wrote down the rule is same for multiplication? Dana? Yeah, division is really multiplication, isn't it? Right? It's multiplying by the reciprocal. So, yes, sir?
So this is like how subtraction is like addition.
Right. So subtraction is really adding the opposite, right? It's the same reason. So that subtraction really has the same rules for addition if you change it to addition, because after all, it's an addition, right? So let's take a look at some of this rule. I think a lot of you know. So when you have two numbers, and why, the reason we just talked about it, why. When you have two numbers that have same sign, so instead of product, I'm going to say quotient, right? Remember, quotient means the result of dividing two numbers, right? What do you think the quotient will be? Would it be positive or negative if two numbers have same sign? Meaning, they're both positive or they're both negative. Like I said, it's the same as multiplication. So what do you guys think? I'll give you time. People are still writing, sorry. Go ahead and write, and let's see, let's answer this together. If two numbers have same sign, their quotient is what? Positive or negative? Everybody go ahead and write it down in your paper. Think about it. So what I mean by same sign is if they both have same sign, both positive or both negative, right? What would the answer be? Okay. How many people say positive? Raise your hand. How many people say negative? How many people are not so sure? Okay, so because not all of you raise your hand. The answer is, of course, positive. Because, right? Because, thank you. Because when the two numbers, like for example, of course, positive divided by positive is going to be positive, right? If it's negative divided by negative, that's the same thing as negative times Negative, right? Because what's opposite reciprocal of a negative number? Still negative. So it'll be negative times negative. You guys remember? We talked about this, right? Reciprocal of a negative number has to be still negative in order for it to be positive, right? When you multiply positive 1. So yeah, the same rules apply for division. What do you think then for two numbers have the opposite sign? Of course, it's going to be what? Hello? It's going to be negative or positive? Negative. Good. Okay, write this down. Yeah. So another sort of fact that I want to talk about, if I have another fact, a plus b over c, lots of times you would just leave it that way because that's the simplest way to write. But what was this before it became a plus b over c? Does anybody know? 3 people? How do we get a plus b over c? What do we do before this leaving? Exactly right. So sometimes you might have to, of course, c can't be 0, right? Because if c is 0, it's undefined. Yeah, sometimes you might have to go back in terms of what it was before. I'll show you why when we do that in a minute, because it may not seem so obvious, right? Because isn't this on the left, right? A plus b over c, isn't that the way to simplify? Because you don't want to leave it as a over c plus b over c, right? When they have a common denominator. Right? If you're simplifying, you just want to write as a plus b over c, don't you? So let's think about when we might want to do this. Okay, so let's look at an example. Now, knowing this, okay, when you have something like this, 4 plus 6 over 2, right? What would you do to simplify this fraction? One person, 2. Okay, go ahead and write it down. Oh, wait. 4 over 6. Normally, you would just do what? When you have 4 plus 6 over 2. Okay. I think most of you are done writing. Okay, what about, raise your hand if you, okay, how about Michael? What do you think, sir? Yeah, it's just this. Remember, a fraction bar works as this is sort of a hidden grouping symbol. You guys remember? So you would just add the numerators together and then you would just get what? 10 over 2. What's 10 over 2, class? 5. Okay, so, but knowing this fact, is there another way to simplify? One person see it. Look at the fact above. I know that normally you wouldn't do that, but if you had to, could you do it this way? How about Sierra? What do you think? I mean, Samira, not Sierra. 4 over 2 plus? Exactly. And do you think, do we still get 5? What is 4 over 2, class? 2. What's 6 over 2?
3.
Okay, now, I understand that normally we don't do it this way, but take a look at this example and see if you could figure out why I'm showing you this. Go ahead. I want you to all think about, and as a matter of fact, I want you to think as your group. Remember, you have your group members. Go ahead. I'm going to give you time. How would you simplify this? Because right now, it doesn't look like it's really, right? You can simplify. You get 4x plus 6y over 2. Correct? So knowing that fact that I just showed you, can we simplify this a little further? Go ahead. I'll give you time, guys. And talk to your group. Okay. No. All right. So let's take a look at this. Let's see. What can we do to then simplify this expression? Because right now it doesn't look like you could really simplify. How about Bella? What do you think, Bella? Exactly. Because we could actually separate them into sum of two fractions, right? And now this is sort of nice because look, does 2 go into 4? Yeah. Could we divide top and bottom of this fraction by 2? Okay, class, what do we get then? What's 4x over 2? What's that? What about 6y over 2? It becomes? 3y. Exactly. And could we add them together, by the way? 2x? No. Why not? Who could, hold on. Why can't we add them together? Don't we get like 5xy? Can it be, how about Brandon? What do you think? They're not like terms. Can we use the distributive property backwards? No. Do you have any common factor in it? No, we don't. So you leave it this way. Does that make sense? All right. Then let's look at the next example. Now, next example, it says simplify negative 64ab times negative 1 over 8. Okay. So this is our next. Okay. Royce, any question? You guys good? Okay, so write this down. And how would you simplify this fraction? This is not just a fraction. It's a this expression, how would you simplify? Isn't this already simplified?
No.
There's actually a way to simplify, right? Anybody see what to do? One person? Two? Three? Okay. Oh, how about Eunice? What do you think? What do you see? That's okay. What would you do? Exactly. Could we gather the negative 64 and negative 1/8? Could we multiply those together? What property allows us to change the order here? This is sort of a good review for your test that's coming. Who haven't I called today? I haven't called Sung. What do you think? What property tells us that we could rewrite this as this? Negative 64. Of course, negative 64 is really negative 64 over 1, right? And then times negative 1/8. What do you think, Sung? Commutative. C4 what, class? C4 change. Okay, you change the order, okay, in which you multiply, right? This works. So of course, how many times does 8? By the way, what's negative times negative?
Positive.
What do we get? What's the answer? 8 what?
AB.
AB. Okay, could I leave? Don't leave out AB. Okay. Okay, there you go. Any question? So things like this. This is what we're going to ask you to do tonight. Yeah, question?
Whenever you change it to commutative, like put them next to each other, is it a multiplication?
Right. So only, yeah, because look, at all the numbers and other variables, all the operations are multiplication. So we could change in any orders we want. So yes, we have just used the commutative property of multiplication. You're correct. Does that make sense? Yeah.
And for our quiz tomorrow, what properties are there again?
All the properties that we learned so far.
So like even the subtraction.
Yeah, even the subtraction and the multiplication. Still. Yes, definitely. Yeah. Yeah.
Is it like, it's gonna be like,
Here we go. Now, Kevin, what should I do on this problem here? I got negative 1/6 times negative 24x plus 6y. How do we simplify this expression?
How do you simplify that?
Uh-huh.
You make it negative 1/6 times negative
Good. What property are you using when you're doing that?
division.
We learned this couple of distributive property. Exactly. Go ahead. Everybody try this. I'll wait. Okay, go ahead. But I want you to write out that step. Don't just do it in your head. Does that make sense? I want you to write out how you're going to distribute negative 1/6 to this first term plus the second term. And I want you to write it out. Don't just do it in your head. Does that make sense? Remember I told you? Don't do it in your head. That's how you make mistakes. Go ahead, guys. I'll wait. Of course, you could work as a group. It's fine. Help each other out. Okay. Okay, who could tell me what to write next? I know that a lot of you could do this in your head. That's not what I'm looking for. Can you show that step? How about Brianna? Can you tell me what steps I should write when I'm distributing negative 1/6 here? Right, negative 1/6 times what? Good, plus, that's the work I want to see, and then plus? Times? Huh? Times 6y is correct. Did you write this step? Oops, can't see. There you go. Did you guys write this step here?
Yeah.
Okay, okay. Don't do this in your head because I know that you could do it, but write it out this way, okay? Because it's easy to make mistakes. Then once you do it this way, what is negative times negative, class? Positive. So you know this number is going to be a positive number. So Brandon, what did you get there? 4x minus minus y. How many people got 4x minus y? Exactly right. I actually wrote 4x plus negative y and then of course. Okay. What property did I use from here to here? Everybody should know because this is going to be like on your test, I think. What property am I using? If I ask you to justify each step, right? What would you write as your answer here? How about somebody that have Chris? What do you think? So it was 4 plus negative y. Definition of subtraction is exactly right. How many thought it was definition of subtraction, Risha? Does that make sense? Yes? Okay. Very good. All right. Now we're going to do some of these straightforward ones. Okay. First of all, would the answer be positive or negative when you're dividing negative 12 divided by negative 5/6? The answer should be, everybody should know. Positive or negative? Ratio?
Positive.
It'll be, everybody?
Positive.
Right? Because positive divided by positive is, negative divided by negative is positive. Just like negative times negative is positive, right?
Yeah.
Now, how would you rewrite this as a then multiplication? Using the definition of division, you could rewrite this as a multiplication, right? One person see it. 2, 3. Who haven't I called? I haven't called. Oh, I haven't called Jenny. Jenny, how would this be if you were to rewrite this as a multiplication? Negative 12 times what? Negative 6 over 5. How many people realize reciprocal of a negative number is still a negative number? Right? Right, Chuck?
Yeah.
Reciprocal of a negative number must be negative. We talked about this. This is important. Right? Because in order for, if you have a reciprocal, they have to multiply to be 1, positive 1. So if the number is negative, of course the other has to be negative. Okay, now, of course, we can multiply this out. The answer is going to be positive. Who thinks they know the answer? How about Christina? What will be 12 times 6, basically, right? 70.
Oh, just kidding.
70?
Wait.
Yeah, 72 over 5, right? Does that make sense? Sorry, maybe I didn't give you enough time. So it'll be 12 times 6. Notice, I knew there was going to be positive, so I didn't even write down negative times negative here, right? Because negative times negative is positive. I wrote 12 times 6. It's not 1.5, it's 1 times, maybe I should put a parentheses. Right? 12 times 6 times 1 point. 12 times 6 over 1 times 5. Yeah, question?
Could you combine it like 72 over 5, or could you write it
Good question. So, do I need to rewrite this as a mixed number? The answer is no. You will find that in algebra, we like improper fractions. As long as it's simplified. Of course, you don't want to write like 8 over 2 or something. It'll be 4, right? You gotta simplify. But yeah, 72 over 5, you can't simplify any further, right? So leave it as improper. It's fine. Okay, we like improper fraction. And as we learned today, it's easier to write as reciprocal, isn't it? If you leave it as improper rather than if you leave it as a mixed number. Spencer, question?
Should we do like first step where we do 12 times 6 over 1 times 5, or should we just leave that out?
Yeah, this step, I guess you can leave it out. But once you know it's, yeah, sort of, yeah, that's fine. Okay. But I just did that to show that it's going to be positive. Okay, good. May I move on? Yes? Okay. Now, let's look at example 4. 48a over negative 8. Negative 8. 48a over negative 8. So how would you simplify this? Anybody see what to do? One person? 2? Matthew, what do you think? I don't think I've called you today.
48 divided by negative 8?
Right. You could think of this as, could we separate these in terms of just numbers and a variable?
Yeah.
How would that be? Jason?
You do 48 over negative 8 plus,
Times, not plus, it would be times.
times a over negative 8.
Would it be a over negative 8?
No.
That's if you had 48 plus a. I think you're sort of confused with that, right? Yes, if you had 48 plus a, it'll be 48 over negative a plus a over negative 8. But that's not what we have here, do we? It's 48 times a. So, it was, from the other period, it was sort of interesting. So people understood that, okay, you could rewrite this as 48 over negative a times what? Anybody know? I want you to discuss with your group. Go ahead. I'll give you time because it was sort of interesting to see people weren't getting this right. What would it be? It would be how do you separate them? Okay, with the variables and the number. How would you do that? Go ahead. All right. A lot of you are sort of still talking. Let me ask: if you're confused, whatever you write next to this, if you multiply this 48 over negative 8 times whatever you wrote here, what should it equal to? In other words, how would you check and see if you got the right number that's multiplying 48 over negative 8? If you were to multiply these two fractions, you should get? No, you should get what you had up here. Right? Yeah, you should be able to get the same expression you had up there, right? So, how many people wrote down 48a over 8? No one did, right? Because if you did? Because if it was a over 8, if you wrote 8 on the bottom, well, 48 times a, you get 48a. That's fine. But what's negative 8 times 8? Do you get negative 8? No. what do you think I need up down here? How about Lilith? 1 is exactly right. How many people wrote this down? Okay. Not too many of you. This was sort of surprising to me. Okay, guys, don't get this mixed up with addition. Like I said, if you had 48 plus a, right, then you could separate into two fractions, adding together. This is multiplication, isn't it? You could think of this as, now if you don't believe me, multiply it out. 48, guys, listen. Chris, here. 48 times a, you get 48a, don't you? Negative 8 times what gives you negative 8? 1. So it has to be 1. Could it be any other number than 1? No. Okay, go ahead, discuss with your group. See if they understand. Does this make sense? Okay, good. Then what is our final answer? How about Carolyn?
Negative 6a.
Negative 6a is correct. Okay. Do you guys see this? So it was sort of surprising to me that people didn't realize it's really a over 1 that you're multiplying this fraction by. Right? That's how you have 48a over negative 8. Isn't that right? Of course, you could just divide top and bottom by negative 8. You get the same answer. But I wanted to just show you, like right? With algebraically, you could actually think of it this way. Is this okay? Yes.
Variables can be capital.
It could be capital letters. Doesn't matter. Okay, may I give you the last example of the day? Okay, try this one. I put a star on this one. It's a very simple fraction, 9 over negative 1 over 7. Class, could we leave it this way? Is this simplified? No. When you have a fraction, you may not have numerators or denominators, right, as a decimal or fraction. In other words, both of the numerator and the denominator must be an integer, right? Right now, negative 1/7 is not an integer. So how would you rewrite this? Go ahead, I'll wait. I want you to think. Go ahead, do it as your group. Help each other out. Let's see how many people get this. Go ahead, try. So how many people realize that this fraction bar is a grouping symbol? So doesn't this really mean 9 over negative 1/7 with parentheses? The fraction means division, isn't it? So you get 9 divided by negative 1/7. What's this mean? This means, by definition of division, is 9 times? Negative 7. What's the answer, class? How many people got this? Raise your hand. Very good. Any questions? Okay, great.